So we're taking a look at the colonization road as a policy and a historical context and the way it's played out in present day. I don't think most Canadians know this. I don't think this is common knowledge. That in an attempt to create a country, a nation state, they created these policies and they played out on the ground through a very short amount of time. But in doing so, displaced many Indigenous peoples that were already here. What can you tell me about the Act?
Well, the Act came about as a need to populate the area between the Rideau River and the Ottawa and the Lake Simcoe. So the government decided if we create a road system, then that will give the access to the land and we would be able to have a greater population. So what they did was they gave you a package, and the package included having free land up to 200 acres, but there were strings attached to it. What you would have to do is that there were conditions you had to meet within a 5-year period. One of them was that you had to build a house or a dwelling of some sort that would be no smaller than 18 by 20, and you had to have over the course of the next 5 years 12 acres cleared.
Come around there and try to get something wider.
By order of Parliament, land grants are to be given for the purpose of settlement in Somerville Township by order of Public Lands Act. How many of these would be printed, like 100?
It could be quite more than that, actually.
Right.
Typically for orders like this, 1 or 2% actually draw immigrants who buy into this program. And so they have to produce quite broadly, and they're going to disseminate these all over the place, town, country, city.
Right.
What was presented to them was the best case scenario. So what you're looking at is an offer of irrigated land, lots of nearby lumber, lots of potential farmland, access to trade markets, roads, things like that, which wasn't always what they found when they arrived here. So they're not told about the winters. They're not told about the lack of access to water for 8 months of the year because everything's frozen. So those little details get left out.
And life would have been very difficult to come over here and to discover things like winter and the land being very different as well.
Well, the advantage of this piece of policy in 1853 is that you're actually given land on a documented surveyed road. So there is a road there, which makes things immeasurably easier than happened to be the circumstance 20 years earlier, when you're given a parcel of land literally in the middle of nowhere. These settlers, they really were, consciously or not, the vanguard of British civilization in the British cultural mode. Their names are on our streets. I mean, we revere and honor these people for their hardships.
Awesome. Hello, Cassandra.
Hello.
Thanks for welcoming us here at, I guess this is the Fife House?
Yes, yep, the Fife House. So this cabin in particular was built in 1825 by David Fife. When they came here, they would get their lot and concession number, and it would be the bush. It would be completely wooded. So they'd have to start clearing the land, making their house, starting their crops, and generally surviving all at the same time.
When they started to clear the land, the land was very different than their homelands.
Yeah, they wouldn't know the land, they wouldn't know the soil. Some people would have been farmers before, but others would have come from the cities even, so they might not have any land experience. So they'd have to really kind of, adapt and learn how to live off of this land.
Were they instructed on what they could farm or what to farm?
I'm pretty sure most of them were intending to farm wheat, and then a lot of them would farm corn as well. So this is our dry storage. So anything we have that's dry. So flour, definitely, dried corn. Here you could have traded for some wild rice.
And in your understanding with Fife in particular, there was a lot of cooperation in this area.
I believe they found moccasins to be so much more useful than European shoes here.
Nice, they're beautiful. I'm wearing my Birkenstocks from 2013. You've included the summer village here at the Pioneer Village. What was the reason for bringing that into the Pioneer Village?
History is often written from one perspective, but we were hoping and are really encouraging, and I know we will have a long-term success with having our neighbors, our First Nations neighbors, come and tell their story in their voice with their way of doing things, because we didn't want to tell their story.
Is it a positive thing to have just a sort of a little wigwam type style thing here for people to walk through? Do they really get a sense of who we are?
They may not have the respect that it deserves, but at least they need to know this is still our traditional land.
Right.
And it's important that people realize that and that we are the first people here. A lot of people think that we were nomadic, but we weren't really nomadic. We traveled around to the same areas.
In this area, were people displaced when settlement started to take place?
At the time, they agreed to bring the wandering savages in and settle us down there and promised us 6 houses, a barn, a church, a school. We were moved a few times before we moved on to the peninsula that is Curve Lake now, and we refused to move any further than that.
Curve Lake, this area, the way settlement has played out relative to your community, hunting and fishing rights are important to us. How difficult has it been historically and sort of in present day to exercise those rights for you?
Right now we're sitting in Treaty 20 area, and we just regained within the past year our hunting, fishing, gathering rights. It was a long, hard fight to get our rights back, and one of the major reasons we got that, all of those rights back, was a court case that was held in the early 70s. At the time it was Chief Doug Williams, and he went all the way to the Supreme Court with their case.
What they were asked to do is to sign this treaty with us after it was determined by a long process of hearings that we had some Aboriginal right entitled to land north of here. And then remember the colonization roads went into this area. There is settlement occurring illegally. So they had to come up with a treaty. In 1923, they had negotiations. The commission came here to negotiate this treaty. First of all, I just want to make it clear that the Williams Treaty has nothing to do with me.
You didn't sign it.
I did not sign this. And our chiefs said that we must keep certain things. We must keep our hunting and fishing and some gathering rights. But there's a clause inserted. We call it the basket clause. It's a clause that wasn't negotiated, wasn't caught at that time, which said basically that we would give up anything and everything we ever had, or think we had, or we ever hope to have even in the future. Based on that clause, they said after that, oh, by the way, you gave up your hunting and fishing rights you saved in the Treaty of 1818. You no longer can hunt and fish. And that was the big wake-up call for our people.
In order of the basket clause, I see a really, really fraudulent process where we were treated just despicably from start to finish in terms of not having legal representation, not having our elders there, even compared to the number treaty process, right? Our lawyer is in the parking lot because they're not allowed in the building, like constant one thing after another.
Just recognize there was a pattern of treaty making up to that point, and part of the treaty making pattern said that there would be land reserved. Well, under the 1923 treaty, there was no land reserved.
There was this impetus in those early negotiations to make sure that in 2014, me and my kids could live as Mississauga and Anishinaabe people in our territory, unfettered, how we always had lived. And I think there was an expectation that we were going to share some land with the settlers. There was an expectation that there were going to be lands for us, lands for them, and lands that we worked together to manage.
The commission was so arrogant, particularly the provincial lawyers, that when time came to be paid for what we negotiated, the Ontario government lawyers said, we really can't give you what you asked for and what we signed for. So we're only giving you $750,000 rather than $1 million. So that from that day on, they owed us $250,000, right, unpaid. Came to the point where we had to sue them. And during this process, the Crown suddenly announces, we want to give you hunting and fishing rights. A lot of people don't realize that you know, we're surrounded by private property. Where do you practice a right that's been given back to you? And that's maybe strategically what they were thinking in 1923. Who knows?
Today is a new day. Let's enjoy it together. This is a great sentiment. I like it. Maybe it is time for Native people, such as me, to stop complaining about the past. Better yet, maybe it's time to get rid of the past altogether. How about 1985? That was the year my second child was born. Let's draw a line with that year. I'll gather up all the North American Indian history prior to 1985, pile it in a field, and I'll set it on fire. I'll get rid of everything. Massacres, deprivations, depredations, broken treaties, government lies, Wounded Knee. 1890, where 487 well-armed soldiers of the 7th Cavalry set on a bluff, the Hotchkiss guns and rifles, and opened fire on an encampment of 350 Lakota. Depending on whom you choose to believe, somewhere between 200 and 300 Lakota were massacred, most of them with women and children. But let's forget about it. That was pre-1985. Afterwards, Congress awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor to 20 of the soldiers who'd been involved in the massacre. But let's forget about those medals, too. Wounded Knee 1890 can go on the pile of forgetted stuff. So can Wounded Knee 1973, along with Louis Riel, the Trail of Tears, mercury poisonings at Grassy Narrows, residential schools, removal, termination, slaughter of buffalo, Kit Carson, John Chivington, Alcatraz, Wild West Show, B-Westerns, the Go Road in Northern California, the Tomahawk Chop, the Wisconsin Fishing Wars, the 1969 White Paper, Leonard Peltier. I'd like to pause for a moment and consider the pamphlet of Interstate Congress for Equal Rights and Responsibility. Do I have to keep reading?